So before we get started with the episode today, I want to take a moment to introduce someone who's going to be joining this podcast as a co-host. Fiona Johan will now be co-hosting episodes of the AEC Leadership Podcast alongside our existing lineup, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome her into this role. If you're part of the AEC PM Connect community, Fiona is already a familiar face. She's host of the AEC PM podcast and has built an incredible community of project managers across the industry. Beyond that, she serves as the manager of strategic marketing and engagement at EMI, where she works tirelessly to connect and support AEC professionals every single day. Fiona brings so much to the table: passion for this industry, a deep understanding of what AEC professionals need, and a genuine commitment to helping people grow. Fiona, the mic is yours. Welcome to the AEC Leadership Podcast.
Some of the biggest career breakthroughs in engineering don't come from technical expertise alone. They come from relationships built years earlier that open doors when it matters most. Yet most engineers still underestimate how much networking and connection building can shape their leadership path and long-term success. In this episode, we're joined by Derek Toffer, Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at Anvil Corporation, with over 30 years of experience across engineering, project management, and global account leadership. We'll talk about how early career relationships can influence major opportunities, why relationship building is critical as a leadership skill for engineers, and how to maintain strong human connections in an increasing digital and automated industry. If you're looking to grow into leadership and expand your influence, or simply build a more resilient and opportunity-rich career, this conversation will give you practical insights to start strengthening the relationships that matter most. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and the leaders who develop them. If you want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver stronger project results, these full-day events are built for you. You can learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. I'm your new co-host, Fiona Johan, and this is the AEC Leadership Podcast, previously the Engineering Career Coach Podcast. Let's dive in. Hi, Derek. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. I'm glad to be here.
We're excited to have you. I was hoping you could start with where you are in your career journey now and what are you spending most of your time on?
Sure. So currently I work for Anvil Corporation. Anvil's a 300 to 400 strong multidisciplinary engineering company. It's employee owned. We focus on critical infrastructure. So that's big complex plants, advanced manufacturing, refining, data centers, power plants, that sort of thing. But our superpower really is in heavy industrial utility systems. That's where we shine. The more complex, the better. So if you have to keep a plant running safely, have a tight turnaround, need to fix or repurpose your infrastructure, we're generally the ones you would call. Throughout my career, I've always been at the intersection of technology, engineering, and people. And this is where I'm at today as a VP of Business Development and Marketing. I'm helping our account teams win work and grow new client relationships. I coach engineers on managing clients for the first time, and we're building systems at Anvil that are AI powered that help us with these functions to deliver what we call a total client experience.
That's great. And in there, you mentioned coaching and leadership for engineers. I guess, why do you think relationship building is such a critical leadership skill for engineers as they grow into those leadership roles?
Well, I think technical excellence gets you to the table. But relationships determine whether you stay there and whether that table gets bigger or not. So, for example, a project manager's primary job isn't managing a project. It's really about managing client relationships. So projects have problems, and what solves these problems isn't necessarily technical. It's a working relationship, and mutual trust. So building trust is what a PM's objective should be. If you want to grow in your career and reach the top, you need to think about integrating relationship skills along with your technical skills, because both are, in my mind, equally important.
I love that you said all that. We here at EMI talk a lot, and people have heard us on the podcast talk about the accidental project manager, right? They've succeeded so well in those technical skills, and someone's like, here, you should run this project. And then you have to learn all these new skills that come along with project management that weren't necessarily part of that technical process before. So I love that you're out there doing the work.
Well, in my mind, to deliver projects correctly and to do it with skill is important. But there are humans behind every project, and the motivations that drive the reasons for the project, and why you're doing it and how to do it to meet the client's needs. Those are all driven by human motivations. So, relationship building and technical combined is what delivers that. It's not separate.
Absolutely. And you're out there representing your firm, right? As a project manager, you're the face of the firm. So it's important that you understand how to do that while also using those technical skills you've built along the way. What are you seeing in the industry today when it comes to how engineers approach like this networking and these professional relationships that you mentioned?
Well, sure. I guess I'll start with the bad, right? Most engineers' view of relationship building is probably, their first idea is, well, you do networking on LinkedIn. You might attend some conferences, but what I'd say is at best that's transactional and it's shallow. I'll give you the worst, which is, the remote and hybrid working environment basically hollowed out what I call organic relationship building that used to happen, when we go visit a site in the hallways, over lunch, talking to a client. Engineers who started their careers during COVID have a significantly fewer number of touch points than the prior generations did. But here's the good. The good is that engineers who do invest in this are standing out more than ever, precisely because so many of their peers don't do it well. And the bar is actually, I'd say, lower today than it was before. So, if you're talking with your client and you follow up with a handwritten note or go and make a site visit when it's not convenient or call them instead of an email, these things really register with clients because they're rare now.
Yeah, you're a big fish in a small pond, right? You're no longer small pond, big fish. Everyone was doing that. Now it's unique. That's wonderful. And so, how have relationships you've built earlier in your career influenced key opportunities or turning points along the way?
Yeah, and in a number of ways, but I'll just share a couple of quick stories with you that kind of illustrate it. The first project I worked on was right out of college. I was a control systems engineer to start with. We were working on a gas plant for the client. I was responsible for the control implementation and the HMI, which is the human machine interface or user interface UI. But I was pretty naive, and it served me well, actually, because I asked lots of fundamental questions. And we designed these user interfaces at the time based on P&ID diagrams. And that's how they were shown on the interface. And I asked the question, this is supposed to be the operator interface. Should we go talk to the operators about how they want this to use this? And the engineers, laughed at me and, no, we never talked to them. They barely know how to use a computer. Why would you do that? And I pursued it. I said, well, I want to go interview them. So I sat down and I interviewed the operators and found out that they wanted a plant represented more like what they see out in the field, right? And so that's just graphics. So we redesigned it for that. Still had all the functionality, but it was just represented differently and it was easier for them to use. And I actually, after that, I wrote a paper on it and submitted it to ISA. It ended up winning Paper of the Year. But it wasn't because I was some great writer or because I was a great engineer. It was just because I considered what people operating the plant needed. And nobody had fundamentally thought about that. And so it created a shift in the way we designed these systems for in the future. Another example I'll give you is I was a junior sales lead. I had just been given a couple of counts to work on. And one of them was in trouble. We had been there for a number of years supporting that client. They had a new plant manager that came on board, and he was looking to outsource our work to other contractors because he was trying to make a name for himself. So what I decided to do is go sit down with him and find out if there's anything that we were doing that he was happy with. and there wasn't much. He said to me, the only thing I can think of is that your on-site safety performance is really good, and we really appreciate that. And so I thought about that, and I asked him, well, would you write a thank you to our team for that, in your own words? And he did, and I took that. And then I also learned that he was trying to impress the president that was coming to town. And I suggested to him, well, what if we bring our vice president and meet with your president and have dinner? And we did. And I took his quote and I made a plaque out of it. And in it, I said, this wouldn't have been possible, this safety record, without your help and support in making this happen. And then we presented that to him in front of his boss, right, at that dinner. And he was just over the moon, right, that we thought about him that way. And it really kind of spoke to what his needs were, right? He needed, support in his new role. And we provided that support. Well, needless to say, we got the contract and continued that for many years afterwards. And just as a follow-up to that, a couple of months ago, I went to another facility. We had a meeting there, and lo and behold, he walked in the room as the plant manager of a completely new client we were trying to do work for. And it turned out about a month after that, we have a new client that we're doing work for again. So, the principle here is that relationships compound. And the person that you're working on a small project with today might be the VP of procurement in your next role, or might be your client. You just don't know. And you're investing in a portfolio of relationships, and they pay off on a timeline, you just can't predict.
I love that, because what I really heard was that you listened, heard the needs, and addressed those in a way that built the relationship. And like you said, it's a small world out there. You don't know, you can't burn bridges. You don't know who's going to come back up and be a helpful connection later.
Strong leadership drives strong projects. Become an AEC PM professional and give your team the leadership skills they need to thrive. Customized PM development, premium content, and a leadership edge that sets you apart. Learn more at aecpm.com.
And in that vein, so for engineers who are deeply focused on the technical delivery, right? That's their happy place. They feel good there. What mindset shift would you offer to help them prioritize that relationship building that's clearly been so valuable to you?
Well, we talked about this a little earlier. Stop thinking of relationship building as something separate from technical delivery. It is technical delivery. The best technical solutions are the ones that the client aren't ones that the client doesn't trust. I mean, they or doesn't understand or can't implement. Communication, trust, alignment aren't soft skills layered on top of engineering. They're just part of engineering, right? You got to build trust with your client. And I'd say this, for engineers, okay, here's a reframe. Think of every client meeting as a design review. Would you show up to a design review unprepared? Probably not. So why would you show up to a client meeting or a lunch and not know what the client's worried about, not understanding what their priorities are, and offer to them something that they just didn't ask for? The other thing I'd say is you need to bring something of value to your clients in every interaction. And it could be something small but valuable, some additional information, an introduction to someone, a different perspective perhaps. This will turn every meeting that you have from a status update into something more like a value exchange. And that's the behavior side of it behind that shift that we're talking about. Now, one thing I would point out is that some engineers resist relationship building because they've seen it done badly, right? I think I'm in sales. I know what people think of sales, right? Empty promises, politics over substance, But what I would say to everyone who's listening is, the most important thing is have integrity. Right. The shift that I'm talking about isn't, well, just be more social. It's about be deliberately valuable to your client and do it consistently. Just be authentic.
I love that you said authentic. I was thinking it the whole time. I just went to a conference and I was listening to some people talk and I was like, man, I know your authentic self. And I wish you would just bring that forward in this conversation, because we do get caught up in like, how how am I representing the firm? These are the things they told me to say. But if you can't bring it authentically, then it just doesn't land the way you want it to. So I always reground ourselves in that one. And then I have a question for you, because we're all fighting the digital tool takeover, right? So with the rise of the digital tools, they're everywhere. There's automation. We're all busy. There's so many things to do. Now you're adding these new tools. You're telling me I also need human connections. How should engineers maintain those strong human connections in their work while they're also dealing with this rise of automation and AI?
Well, I'm a technologist. First of all, I'm an engineer and I'm a people person. And I can tell you that this is one of the greatest times to be an engineer that there's ever been, right? In my career, this is the
That's great
funnest.
Did you hear that? Everyone in high school thinking about a major in college. Please join us.
AI and the technology behind it, I call it, assistive technology, really, is really transforming engineering fundamentally, but in good ways, in positive ways. So to answer your question, the use of digital tools like AI can make your human interactions better. It doesn't replace them. But for example, you can do AI research on a client, investigate their financials, investigate the background of what's been going on with their company. I used to have to go and search all of the investor calls and information to go research it. It took hours. You can do that in 10 minutes now. And that's 10 minutes that you now have to think about, what does this client actually need? And what are the human questions that I can ask that no AI tool can do? Now, there's some risks, right? The real risk is that if you use AI to try to replace relationships, at best, AI will give you mediocre relationships, right? And it's obvious to humans that when you're doing that, there's no personal investment beyond the touch points that you're giving. So efficient communication, and everyone's used to this now. You get in an email all the time. It's just really polished spam, is what I'd call it, right? There's no investment behind it, and people know that.
They can feel it.
I'd say some practical guidance. Use AI and digital tools to prepare better. Do your research, but always deliver human. Phone call, site visit, handwritten note. The combination's powerful if you use them together. And the preparation will make you credible, when you do your AI research, but the delivery makes you memorable. One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou. She wrote that I have learned that people will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's important. It's a word that engineers don't like, right? Make them feel. But that is what's important around interpersonal relationships, right? How does it feel to work with you? How does it feel? Do I have confidence you're going to be able to deliver for me what I need? That feeling and how you react really sets the tone for the whole relationship.
Absolutely. And you want to be someone who people want to work with again, right? So if they're looking for another contract out there, they're like, you know what? That Derek, he was great to work with, and they've got a bid in here, and that was an easy relationship. We would like to do that again. And that, I love that you said the prep, right? But I think sometimes we don't prep enough for our social interactions or those conversations. And I love that we're thinking about how we can use this AI tool that is so unhuman to be more human.
I think something that everybody who's been in engineering a little while can relate to is, you pour your heart and soul into a proposal, and you have the best technical solution, and the client chooses someone that has, in your view, a lesser solution, or maybe not as sophisticated, and people are puzzled as to why that happens. And I would point to the fact that it's probably because that client had a relationship and trusted that provider to take care of some of their core needs. And that's the difference, So it's, the best technical proposal doesn't always win, but combined with a focused relationship, it's very powerful.
Yeah, the technical proposal plus the feeling of trust, that's unbeatable. I have one more question for you. So, if firm leaders listening today are thinking about leadership training for their teams, what should they be looking for to make sure it actually drives impact?
Well, I can tell you from experience, I've tried different approaches. And I can tell you, first of all, what doesn't work, right?
Love it.
These 2-day offsite training workshops that, where you go to a conference, you listen to a
The
speaker,
boot camps.
right? The boot camps, people go back to doing exactly what they were doing before. It's
They put that
fun.
binder on the shelf and it collects dust and you never think about it again. That one?
Exactly. And I'd say also generic leadership frameworks that aren't connected directly to your work, right? I mean, I think engineers can smell theoretical fluff miles away. So, what I know does work and what we're implementing at Anvil with AI enabled is training that's embedded in real work. So not a hypothetical case study. We're taking an actual client, building an actual account plan, working with them to do the actual meeting prep, and then coaching as they go through that client interaction. One thing that we didn't have before is the ability, with the client's permission, of course, to record conversations and then analyze how did we do, and AI will actually give you feedback to improve, right? So that works. Accountability structures often forgotten about. So you have to have, I don't know, monthly check-in or a cohort or a peer group or some kind of accountability to what you're trying to do. Otherwise, it's just entertainment, I think. And tools. If you train someone to prepare for a client meeting, but don't give them a template of how to do that or a work process, they, at best will struggle. And you've taught them theory, but no mechanism to actually make it work. So you have to provide some tools or some framework. And I think the other thing that I think is very powerful is people look up, and they see our senior leaders doing the same thing. If I tell all of my account leads, you have to do a call plan before every meeting, and I'm not doing call plans, they'll see the hypocrisy there. So.
Absolutely. I love all of that. As a firm that specializes in training programs, that all rings very true, especially when you're trying to implement something very custom to your company. So that is great. I love the end piece there, that if your leadership's not doing it, no one else will. People notice. Well, thank you so much for your time, Derek. This has been a lovely conversation. Appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully our paths cross again soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Fiona. I really appreciated all the insightful questions you had today. So
please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aecleadershippodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode.